Basically, 5 years ago, we made our first free-to-play game called Dice Soccer. And this year, we'll be launching a sequel, or as I like to call it, a reboot. Yeah, all right. 5 years in the free-to-play industry has given us a lot of time and a lot of perspective, allowed us to learn a lot of lessons, and as we continue to make our next wave of free-to-play games, I'd like to share some of those experiences and perspectives with you. Basically, when it comes to freemium, if you can relate to any of these sentiments, you might find this talk useful. So a little context for the timeline that we're talking about. LambdaMu is a company founded in Singapore in 2009 by a guy called Ivan and myself, and is now 10 people strong. We started this company because we wanted to make deep, immersive, and charming games on the new mobile platforms that were coming up. By 2010, we had put out a couple of paid titles, a puzzle game and a tower defense game, but by this time, IAP had been introduced to the App Store. So in 2011, we launched our first free-to-play title with Dice Soccer. In that same year, for the first time ever, free-to-play games had made more money on the App Store than paid games. The landscape was already starting to change. In 2013, we had a big hit with Pixel People. And now, in 2015, we are putting Dice Soccer out again. So let's just jump back in time to 2010 and take a closer look at what Dice Soccer is about. That was my time jump. What is Dice Soccer? Without going into too much detail, Dice Soccer is a game where players collect cards of different players who each have unique dice. You form teams, you put these players on the field, the characters roll their dice, and they try and beat the other team's score. The fun actually happens when characters perform skills based on certain combos that you can roll. So it's all about finding these ideal skills and combos and making a good team to smash the opponent with. The response for our game, our first free-to-play game, was the best thing we could hope for back then. Our ridiculous premise was well received by critics and players alike. Critics called it addictive, they called it crack, they called it magic, they called it peanut butter and jelly for some reason. Players created entire wikis dedicated to figuring out how to pass each level, how to best combine the different characters, and it made us more money than we'd made before making paid games. And better yet, every day players were demanding more content. We knew we had something good on our hands. But even though we made more money than ever before, we were still nowhere near the competition. I don't have real performance graphs from back then, but with time, it kind of looked something like this. When the game stopped being sustainable, we dropped support for it and decided we'd come back to it some other day. In the meantime, something else had caught our eye. I'm just going to jump again. 2011, Tiny Tower got us excited about free-to-play once more. So we were like, we should totally make a pixel art game this time, a building game, a game that's even better than this one, even cuter, even more charming. How about that idea where you need to create genetically engineered people in a utopian society? That sounds perfect. And then Pixel People was born. Pixel People, as some of you might know, before we go into that, what was happening in 2011? We were designing Pixel People very cautiously. Why? In 2011, the hate for free-to-play was at its all-time highest. Zynga was literally top dog in the market. Jon Stewart was taking jabs at predatory freemium games on his daily show. And again, this was the first time ever that free-to-play earnings had overtaken paid earnings on the App Store. To some groups of people, this was absolute proof that the end times were upon us. So even with something universally praised like Tiny Tower, people were calling it freemium crap, claiming it's not a real game, right? So we went into Pixel People very, very cautiously. Pixel People launched in 2013, and some of you might know how it works. You take people with jobs, you genetically combine them, see what new job they create, unlock new parts of your city, and you build your city to your heart's content. Just like with Dice Soccer, because of this charming world we'd created, and because of some of the design decisions we made, we were media darlings overnight. But this time, even more mainstream and even more stellar reviews. IGN, Kotaku, Touch Arcade, critics called us the brave new world of freemium. The wikis started popping up, downloads went into the millions, and most importantly, we broke into the top 100 grossing apps on the App Store. This was huge for us. Unfortunately, that hugeness didn't last too long. A few weeks on, In fact, even at our peak, we were being ousted by free games that were less friendly. As time went by, we dropped off the top 100, the top 200, the top 500, and eventually into the familiar territory of App Store oblivion. Rank 67 was great on grossing, but not good enough. How were the slot machine games, the Clashes of Clans, the Simpsons, the Rages of Bahamut, maintaining their ranks for so long? We had been designing our games based on what we thought was fair and good by our own standards, and while critics may have agreed with us, the market was clearly saying something completely different. It made us think long and hard about what we were doing, and other people wanted to hear our thoughts too. People were writing articles about our design decisions and whether they were sustainable. In fact, at Casual Connect here in Singapore in 2013, I gave a talk on this very subject titled, "Do Nice Guys Finish Last?" or in our case, 67th. Like, do you have to choose between monetary success and being the good guy? More recently, my partner Ivan gave a talk in Hong Kong titled, "Is Free-to-Play Evil?" which asks whether free-to-play game design and good game design, are they mutually exclusive? Since I'm going to be building on both of these questions, let me try and summarize each of the talks for you. Do nice guys finish last? Yes. Is freemium evil? No. That was pretty much the gist of it. But with time, it became more apparent. We were extremely happy being here at the good end of the spectrum, and we made some decent money in the process. But as the graphs have shown you, that with time, we weren't happy about being trapped in the good corner, especially when it's so far away from where the sustainable money seemed to be. So we had to look long and hard at what we'd done with our games and how what we were doing with our games was very out of sync with what the market was doing. So let's look at some of these mistakes. This should be fun for you guys. All right, Dice Soccer in 2010. We only had one currency in this free-to-play game. That was one of the most basic mistakes we made. This limited our control over the economy and made it very hard to sell this currency that was so easy to earn for the player. I won't go too much into this one because it's pretty common knowledge by now why this is a bad idea. The second thing we did, which is another big mistake, since we had only one currency, is we made every single card in the game unlockable via an individual IAP. You could earn these cards via achievements too, but if you saw a card you really wanted, a player you really wanted, you could pay up the cash and get it right away. This didn't turn out to be really fun for our players who actually enjoyed tackling the achievements we designed, and this happened to be true for most of our players. It also created a huge logistical nightmare for us to maintain and update and monitor 100 different purchases on the App Store, and all of this just because we wanted to give players full control and full choice. I recommend never doing this. Since everything in our game was optional and easily earnable, we decided to include a layer of cosmetics. Most were earnable through the game, but we kept some as IAP only. We had this naive notion that this would be a way for users to thank us for all the fun times they've had with our game, and sure enough, they did. The all-time best-selling item and top IAP in Dice Soccer that made us the most money and kept us alive for a few months was this pair of black shorts at the bottom. Black shorts. It baffled us then, it baffles us now, but I think since black shorts matched all the other jerseys that were in the game very nicely, it was probably the only thing players ever wanted to buy, and that was it. We got 99 cents for black shorts, and nothing else the rest of the game. Finally, our biggest mistake that pretty much killed the future of the game was that the retention of our users was tied purely to content. Content that was amazingly crafted, but extremely resource-intensive to craft. The rate at which people blew through our content and demanded for more was much higher than what we could put out. Much higher than the rate at what we could put out. Eventually, we did put a fun PvP system in an update, but it was, again, all for free for some reason. It felt quite slapped on, it wasn't well integrated, and in the end, it didn't do much to save the game. So eventually, we had to stop supporting the game. But now, we'd learned all these valuable lessons, and while others were pushing the envelope of free-to-play, we would do it our own way, the better way. So let's look at what went wrong with Pixel People. Pixel People, first up, we put in, obviously, a dual currency. We had coins that can be used to buy things, and we had something called Utopium that's used to speed up things. Simple fix, right? Most games do this. They have an easy farming currency and another premium currency that's hard to earn. Some games make the premium currency easy to earn, but make the spending requirements escalate with time. Some games do both. We decided to be generous and do neither. Speed-up costs were the same whether it was for 1 day or 1 hour, and the speed-up currency was always quite easy to earn. That didn't work out for us in the long run. Why? Because it was compounded with other mistakes we made in the same spirit of generosity. We had no limits on anything. No storage caps, no caps on how many animals you could collect, no currency caps, not even on the easy premium currency. In fact, the only limit we had was the integer limit in the game. And even then, people started freaking out when their money couldn't go over 2 billion because we couldn't store a larger amount. And worse for us, this way we had no idea how many resources people had when an update came out. So even though content was much easier to create in Pixel People than in Dice Soccer, our economy made it even easier to blow through. The combination of generous currency and no storage limits meant that even with our fastest development time, fastest QA time, and fastest possible approval time, we were looking at least 3 weeks per update for something people would blow through in 4 days. We had invested in a lot in content breadth, but not enough in the depth that would make the content longer lasting, more time consuming, but more fun for the player to play. For the first time, we were also dealing with audiences in the size of millions, which meant the spectrum of experiences was extremely unpredictable. When something went wrong with the economy, there was no quick way to push a balance patch. We didn't do a soft launch, and this prevented us from catching any negative emergent user behavior in our complex system. On the left, you see a picture of the kinds of cities people would build so that they could tap and farm currency as efficiently as possible. This is an actual city people built. This is a very ugly city. This is not how we wanted people to play our game aesthetically, and it was breaking our game economically, and we didn't foresee this. Finally, we had no social systems on launch, and ironically, this was a game people actually willingly wanted to share on Instagram and on Twitter. By the time we put our own social features in, it was again too slapped on, too little, too late. So interestingly, with each of these things, these so-called mistakes, there's a way to put a good spin on every single one. All these things that we did seemed great for the player. It seemed great for karma. But it sucks when it comes to long-term performance. And that's when it started to dawn on us. There's a good reason why all the games that are consistently sitting on the top of the charts implement all of these systems. Now, you might be thinking, aren't these the very things people hate about free-to-play, at least in the Western market, which is where we make most of our games for? Well, anyone will hate anything they don't understand or aren't familiar with, especially if they're done poorly, and more so if they're not fun. In Asia, we know these systems of free-to-play have been evolving for a long time and have slowly becoming essential to every game out there. So going back to this line, as developers, should we be adding these things to push ourselves backwards along the line to become more evil so we can become more rich? To that, I say no. We're looking at this wrong, or we were looking at this wrong. This is not a line, it's a two-dimensional space. And if you fold it, if you fold it, you get something like this, where evil just means, are you creating enough reasons for the player to monetize? And good should mean, are you treating the player with respect and dignity? Are you providing them with interesting choices and the freedom to express themselves in the game? Let's look at each of these quadrants individually really quick. At the top right, we have the one which we as developers aim for. It's the holy grail of free-to-play gaming. It's what professionals and critics have finally recognized as the future of gaming. This is free-to-play done right. If you watch the web series called Extra Credits, they talk a lot about free-to-play gaming and its immense potential to be the most inclusive form of gaming. When done right, it contains that perfect harmony that players enjoy, where players enjoy playing your game and they enjoy paying for your game, multiple times in multiple possible ways. It's the Hearthstones, the League of Legends, the Dotas. It could be any free game you've played on your phone that you've actually looked forward to spending money on. Funnily enough, this is the area we always knew we wanted to be in. That's a slide from my talk 2 years ago. But we wanted people to be happy making purchases in our game. But where did we go wrong? According to Extra Credits, free-to-play games fail because of 2 reasons. The first is an area I think we're all familiar with. This is the space that gives free-to-play its bad rep. It's the reason South Park gets to tell us we're ruining gaming. Now, I don't think pay-to-win is inherently bad, but it's the outright pay-to-win model that sucks. It's where the player is constantly forced into paywalls, or where the systems are placed to trick the gamer out of a few bucks. Sure, the system makes money, but it breaks the community, and in the long run makes everyone in general hate their experience with the game. I don't think this is what you want as an aspiring developer, and it's not what we wanted either. But the other failure space is the one where we shoehorned ourselves into, mostly because we were so afraid of getting lumped in with the first group. And you may think, hey, that's not so bad. But let me tell you clearly, being in this space is an injustice to both the player and the developer in the long run. By being diametrically opposed to pay to win, we are still dooming ourselves. Because in this space, you fail because it becomes more fun for the player not to spend any money. The fun comes in from seeing how far you can go for free. The challenge disappears once you pay, or at best, it becomes dull and routine. Pixel people suffered a lot from these issues. It was fun for a while, but as a monetization technique, it kills the developer, it kills the game, and kills the fun for everyone. In short, both of these outcomes arise from a lack of understanding of free-to-play systems. By slapping them on instead of carefully integrating them, by failing to make them a part of the fundamental game design process. So what are we supposed to do now? Well, as game designers, we want to keep fun, joy, and engagement at the very core of our design. And this should be the case regardless of what kind of game we're making. But when it comes to free-to-play, while we have to remain focused on these three pillars, all these other things are immensely important to keeping the game alive. We've learned this through experience. But not as some creepy bystander lingering awkwardly outside your design process, but as someone you understand, someone you befriend, someone you include right from the very beginning. You make this an essential part of your overall experience so you can create something together that keeps both you and the player happy for a long time. This is the way we resolve the paradox of good game design and free game design. And this is what we've learned over 5 years of making, playing, and talking about our favorite free games. And it's what we're looking to achieve in the next iterations of these games as well. So I hope you guys gain something too from our experience. But you must be wondering, hey, all that sounds good in theory. How do we actually do it? Well, hopefully I'll get a chance to talk again next year at Casual Connect and share with you how it all worked out. In the meantime, you can come to our booth, check out our new game, talk to us, or ask me questions here. You can follow me on Twitter. My name is Abhishek, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Abhishek. Do we have any question from the room?
You kind of mentioned, like, I don't think pay to win is inherently bad.
Yeah.
As a game designer, why?
So there are ways it can be interesting, right? There are games that do have, you could say something like Hearthstone, right? Can be pay to win because you buy all the legendary cards, you buy the good cards, you have a better deck than someone who's not paying, right? But that's not bad, right? And for the person, just like with sports, like let's look at real world as well, right? In sports, are real life sports and games pay to win? Kinda, right? The guy who buys the better gear, buys the better golf club, or buys the better equipment might have an edge over you. But that doesn't make you immediately disadvantaged or say that you can never beat that guy, right? So that kinda is a pay to win system, which doesn't necessarily make it that if you pay, you will definitely win, right? If you pay and you definitely win, that's the kind of system that we don't like for sure. But there are interesting ways in life and in games to put in systems that can be called pay to win, but are not pay to necessarily win or necessarily pay to win. That's what I mean. Yeah. There's an interesting talk on YouTube by this guy from EA called Ben Cousins, where he talks about this and talks about how they pivoted from, I think it was Borderlands, that they pivoted from paid to free and how it affected them. It's a good one to watch. Yeah.
Have you considered making, like, let's say, a pay-to-play game instead of a free-to-play game? For, like, because you said that you IAP'd everything in Dice Soccer, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you make it like pay-to-play and maybe release a trial version that is free-to-play?
Yeah, so that is something we consider and something we started out with, right? Initially, when we had our paid games and people were pivoting to free-to-play, we did the trial and convert as well, right? And the dice soccer thing didn't work because we didn't understand how free-to-play was supposed to work. We just thought you put an IAP on everything and money will come in, right? Why we favor free-to-play over paid is that's just the kind of games we like to play, and we just like the idea of everyone being able to play, right? And everyone having the chance at the full experience and being able to put back into the system whatever they can afford, right? Because even if we had a free version and then pay to upgrade, if you can't afford that upgrade, you just get locked out of the experience. And that's not what we want for our users. We want to try and get as many people in as possible and create an environment where you can pay what you want and get a good experience out of it, and there are opportunities to pay, but it's always value.